You can go ahead and turn to James 4. James chapter 4, and we're going to look at verse 14 in just a minute. And my voice is shot because I don't ever sing except for church, and now I just gave it my all. So, here we are. I remember when I was in the teen group, I was in 7th grade, and I remember Brother Ron was preaching one night. Excuse me, this is just going to be rough, okay? Just bear with me, and it's already starting, so this should be fun. Brother Ron was preaching, and he told this story, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he told this story. Let's call him Ted. Ted sounds like a good name. So he told the story of Ted, and Ted was a 17-year-old boy, and he went to the doctor. He had some things going on that was affecting his sports in high school. He wasn't able to play like he normally was, and so he went to the doctor, and he found out that he had cancer. And the doctor told Ted, you have 3 months left to live. And I remember as he told this story about Ted, that Modesty on the front row, she started sobbing. And then Cody, the boy that she liked at the time, he started crying a little bit too. And she was like, she said, man, girls like a guy with emotions. So anyway, that story sticks out to my head, sticks out to me. And so whenever I was hearing that story, obviously it was a fake story too, which kind of made everybody who was crying laugh a little bit and kind of mad at Brother Ron. But I remember hearing that story, and as a 13-year-old, I was thinking, I mean, life is short, but like when you're 13, you only have 13 years of reference. Now I have a decade more of that to reference, and the last between 0 and 13 felt like it went a lot slower than 13 to 23. My guess is you probably have experienced a lot of that same thing. The older you get, the faster the years go by. And as someone who is on the younger end of this room, I know that if you're older than me, you know even more. It just moves, and life is short. Now, I animated the pot, and so you should be able to see a little bit of steam, and I'm very proud of that. But anyway, so I'm going to actually move out of the way because I have a few slides and I don't want to be distracting with it in my face the entire time. But life is short, and that's the big takeaway that I want you to have today. If you actually go to slide number 2, the big takeaway is that because life is short, we should redeem the time. And the term redeem the time means make the most of the time that we have. And if your life is not going to last very long, we got to spend it the right way. And let me give you a quick overview of what we're going to look at, and we're going to dive into our first verse. We're going to talk about, number 1, that life is short. Number 2, we're going to talk about how to spend your life. We should be spending our lives, not just living our lives. A lot of people let life happen to them, and they're not the ones controlling their life. They're not in charge of their life, but God didn't ask you just to live. He asked you to redeem the time. And so in order to do that, we have to spend your life, not just live it. Number 3, we're going to talk about how to spend it on the right things, because there's lots of people spending their lives. Don't get me wrong. You can be unsaved and still spend your life, but it's not going to be on things that matter. So it's got to be on the right things. And then number 4, if you find out that you're not spending your life on the right things, change. The worst word ever. Because sometimes, I don't know about you, but I found myself plenty of times spending my life, investing my life, pouring my life, absolutely in control. My decisions. But it wasn't on the stuff that mattered. And as a Christian, I think it's a failure on our part if we fail to realize these truths. So let's go to number 1, life is short. I want you to look at James chapter 4. I had you turn there. James chapter 4. And look at verse 14. Actually, let's start with the context. Verse 13 says, "Come now, you who say, today and tomorrow we will go into this city, spend a year there, buy and sell, and make a profit." Now, who's ever had a plan for your life? You ever thought, by the time I am XYZ, whatever age, I'm going to have these things. I will have this kind of job. I'm going to live this kind of way. I'm going to be married, have kids. Okay, and who has all of your plans working out for you? Okay, fantastic. We're all in the same group, which means that this verse applies to us because we've all made plans before, haven't we? We've all said that I'm going to go here and I'm going to move there and I'm going to do this business and I'm going to have this kind of job and then I'm going to make a profit. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to do this and do that. We've all done that. And it's not wrong to make plans, okay? Don't get me wrong. James doesn't say that it's wrong to make plans here. He's just saying when you make plans, here's how we're going to do it. Look at verse 14. He says, whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. So when you make plans knowing that you're not quite sure that that's going to work out. Now listen, when we first started this church, I thought, man, me and Kayla, we're going to start a Bible study. We had one other girl who came with us that very first week. And man, us three, we're going to change the world. Everything's going to be different. We're going to get in there. People are going to see us with our Bibles open. They're going to come pull up chairs next to us and sit down and be like, dude, what are you talking about? I want some of that. They're going to get saved left and right. We're going to, every time we're in public, people are going to be like, oh, that's the Capernaumites. And then they're going to see our cool t-shirts and think, dadgum, I want to be part of that. They have the best t-shirts. I thought that we were going to make the difference. I thought that every time we went outside, for some reason in my brain, I forgot that Louisiana is actually just like, maybe not part of hell, but like a section just above because it's that hot. And so I didn't realize that like the baking feeling that you get whenever you're out on the tarmac knocking on doors, I forgot about that side. So I thought, man, we're going to be out on visitation every weekend. We're going to be able to knock on doors. Everybody that we invite, or at least a percentage of them, which is going to be higher than everyone else because average is just midway. We might actually be better than average. More percentage of people that we knock on are going to come to our church. It's going to be super easy. We're going to go. I started that in 2020. Here we are, 2024. 4 years later almost. We're just a few months shy of that very first Bible study in November. 4 years later, we're still a nucleus of people. Meaning that my plans, I didn't know what tomorrow held. Now, it's not to say that it was bad to make a plan, and it's also not to say that the plans that we make have to work out that way. Because remember, the Bible says that all things work together for good to them who love God, I think that we do, and those who are called to according to his purpose. And so sitting here 4 years later, it's not a bad thing that we are where we are. It just means that our plans didn't go the way that we thought. And that's where James says, listen, if you have plans and if you're making plans, that's great, but you don't know what tomorrow holds. And then he makes this point. Verse 14, what is your life? It is just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. That's why I have the pot. And you probably all heard the illustrations. When you boil water on the stove, that water starts in there. And then it turns into steam once it gets hot enough. And then that steam disappears. You see it, if the pot's here, you see it about this high, and then it's gone. Your life is just like that vapor. It's just like that steam. It just disappears. And year after year, you can look at the previous year and see how fast it went. See how little of your plans went the way that you wanted. How little of a difference you're able to make. We don't know what tomorrow's going to hold. And tomorrow might not even hold anything for us. Our life might just be over. It's short. There's so many misconceptions that we have around this. Sometimes people say, well, life is short, so I got to make the most of it, meaning they're going to spend it on things that make them happy, that fulfill them emotionally, that are whatever they desire. They hold not anything back from themselves. But I know a guy who did that. His name was Solomon. He said, if I wanted to look at it, I did. If I wanted to try it, I did. If I wanted to own it, I did. He was the richest, most powerful man in the world. He had anything that he wanted, and yet he still said that it was all emptiness. It's worthless. So people say that life is short. Man, I got to make a difference. I got to spend it on things that make me happy. But Solomon lived a long time, and he still wasn't happy at the end of his life because he wasted it. Some people say, man, life is short, so I guess I don't have anything really to do. Now, I'm not this kind of person, but I do know that they exist. I don't have a lot that I can really contribute and change in this world. I can't really make an impact. I only have a few years. I've already spent this many of them. I'm already 30. I don't have kids, whatever the excuse is. I don't have the job that I thought I was going to have. And so I guess I'll just give up and not even try anymore. Your life is short. And that's how you want to live it? You only have so many years left, so many days left maybe? And that's how we want to waste it? Just throw it away and don't even try for something bigger because I've already spent some of it. In the words of Dave Ramsey, every time I see that I've made a bad decision, I immediately make a different decision. So if our life is short, we can't just throw it away, and we can't spend it on the wrong things. We can't just live it. We have to spend it. And that brings us to number 2. Spend your life, don't just live it. Spend your life, don't just live it. Turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 2. We're going to do a lot of turning today. This is a more topical sermon, which is really weird for me, so just bear with me, okay? Oh, there's Harper's baby picture, actually her heartbeat. Ecclesiastes chapter 2. If you look at verses 18 and 19, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Spend your life, don't just live it. Now, before we jump into this verse, remember the idea here is we're not just trying to exist. We're not just trying to take whatever life throws at us. We're trying to control our life. Now, there was a man named Solomon who was a king over Israel. He was wise, and he was, rich. And you remember the whole story around that. God visited him one night. He said, Solomon, what do you want from me? Anything you ask, I'll give you. Now, Solomon could choose the most beautiful wife in the world. And before you're married, that is exactly the thing that you want. And after you're married, that's exactly the thing that you have. At least I do. Nobody else can. So you want the most beautiful wife in the world. And Solomon could have asked for that. And he could have gotten it. Solomon could have asked for all the money in the world. And he could have gotten it. He could have asked for the greatest empire in the world. And he could have gotten it. But instead, he asked for wisdom to rule what he did have well. It's a good lesson for us. The problem is, although he ruled the other things well, he failed to use the wisdom on himself. Sometimes we do that too. We have wisdom. We have the roadmap and the directions that we need, but we fail to use wisdom on ourselves. When we do that, we just live life. We take whatever life gives us, we don't spend it. Now, Solomon did this, and he realized that although God had blessed him, this is what he realized. Okay, look at verse 18 and 19. Actually, look at verse 17, because this will give the context. He says, and I began to hate life. Great way to start. And here's why. For the labor that was done under the sun was contemptible to me, for all of this was vanity and chasing the wind. Now, have you ever chased the wind? Have you ever seen a little kid on the soccer field who's like not exactly the best player, just chasing a butterfly off the field? That's what he's like. That's what it's like to labor under the sun, or to labor on earth as a human. Because you build things and you build things and you build things, and he says it's just like chasing butterflies, chasing the wind. It's contemptible, it's a waste of time, and I hate life because of it. Look at verse 18, or 19. No, 18. He says, and I despised all the toil in which I labored under the sun, which I will give up to the man who comes after me. Meaning you get all of this stuff in life. Everything that you do gets something for you. But when you die, everything that you have gotten goes to somebody else. Now, that might be an inheritance. That might be an estate that you leave to someone. That might be a job that is now open for someone to fill. It might be a house, whatever it is. You leave it to somebody else. But watch what he says in verse 19. And who knows if this man will be wise or a fool? Yet he will gain power over every labor that I have toiled in my use of wisdom under the sun. Also, this is vanity. When you die, you don't know what's going to happen. Everything that you built, everything that you worked for, is left to someone else, and you have no control. Spend your life, because it's the only thing that you have control over. See, everyone in this world, if they're not saved, they don't have anything to live for. Some people try to find value in leaving a legacy, they call it. I want my kids and my grandkids to know who I am. I want them to know the influence that I had. I want them to follow my footsteps. They want to leave a legacy and a pattern for everyone else. Some people want to amass great wealth and riches for their kids so that their children and their grandchildren, whoever comes after them, have everything that they want because they didn't growing up, and so they want to have the opposite of that for their kids. Some people like to have knowledge and they want to pour out their knowledge, and they're always trying to share wisdom, speak into the lives of those around them, trying to leave something behind. That's fantastic, but you have no control once you die. So spend your life, don't just live it. Everything you do gets something, and everything you get goes to someone else, and you don't know who. And this is why people try to find meaning in their lives, and that's why we have to do right with what we have. We don't have the future. We don't have after our life is over. We have today. And we're not trying to control the future. We're trying to make the most of today. And that's where we have to decide, really, what are we going to spend our life on now? So we know that it's short, and we know that we don't have forever. We also know that we don't want to just live life. We want to spend it on something, but we want it to be something that matters, something that lasts. And if all we're ever trying to do is get the job that we want someday, or step from here to this job or to this job, if we are always trying to buy and sell and trade these things, always trying to make a small profit so that we're always getting a little bit ahead, always trying to get more friends, have more influence over our family, have more kids, whatever the thing is, it doesn't matter, because it's all going to die too. Everything's going to be tested by fire someday. And what you build on earth is just wood, hay, and stubble. But what you do for the kingdom lasts. Look at chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes and look at verse 14. He says, I have perceived that everything that God has done will be lasting. We're going to stop there because there's more context there. But only what God does lasts. So then the question is, well, how do we spend our life if only God can do things that are meaningful? If only God can build things that will stand? Because we can let him do things through us. What we build, what we do, can be God-controlled. Ephesians chapter 5. Go ahead and turn there. Galatians, Ephesians. Ephesians 5, verse 15 and 16. And I want to say, Nick, that you referenced these last week. He says in verse 15, see then that you walk carefully, not as fools, but as what? Wise. As wise men, making the most of the time, or as some would say, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. And he says, listen, if you don't want to be a fool, then do something that's wise. If you don't want to be someone who builds and builds and builds, do something that's worth building. And the only way to do that is to redeem the time. And how do you redeem the time that you've got left? How do you spend that wisely? Is you let God be the thing that you're spending your life on. You're not spending it on this thing. You're not spending it on this hobby, on this family, on this business, on this acquisition, on this thing that you're buying. You're not doing that. You're spending it on God. And as you spend your life on God, you can do these other things. You see what I'm saying? No man can serve two masters. But when I am serving a master, I have to do work for the master. We are going to do work for God, but we are doing it in his name. It's not, I'm going to pastor a church because I am a pastor. It's, I'm going to pastor a church because that's what God's called me to do. Whatever your job is, whether that's in your business, your place of work, whether that is in your family, whatever you are doing in your friend's circle, in the community around you, whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. And so that is how you spend your life, not just live it. You got to take control of your life because it's got to be for a reason. And if it's just for you, then that's not a very good reason because you're going to die. If it's just for your posterity, the people who come after you, that's not a good reason either because guess what? They're also going to die. And you don't even know if they're going to be wise or fools, like Solomon said. You don't even know if they're going to use what you leave them well. So why would you waste it on something like that when instead you can spend it for the king? Instead, you can spend it on your Father, on your Master. Serve him. And if you look at John, go back to John chapter 10. John 10, verse 10. Actually, look at verse 7. Then Jesus said to them again, truly, truly, or verily, verily, I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. All who come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep do not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief does not come except to steal and destroy. Now listen, by the way, before we keep going, we are all sheep. We're all saved. We are the people that God is guarding and controlling and living life through. He's causing our lives to go in a certain way. And this is what he says in the second half of verse 10. He says, I came that they may have what? Life. And that they may have it more, what? Abundantly. We do not live a life that's spent, like Solomon said, getting and doing and earning and then giving it off to people. We don't spend a life that's just on humans. It's not just on this world and just on what we can do. It's on what God has given us to do. So don't just spend your life on something that is yours. Spend it on something that is God's. Now, that's really kind of the crux of the next point is number 3, spend your life on the right things. Now, we can choose. Okay, I want you to walk through this framework with me real quick. So we know that life is short, right? We know that we're going to die, and it's going to not be that far from now. And we know that in between now and then, there's not a lot of life that we actually have objectively. If you zoom out, realize the world is like 6,000 years old, you are just a tiny little blip on that radar. Your life means not a lot significantly. Life is short. We don't just want life to happen to us, we want to spend it. And in order to spend it, we have to choose on what we will spend it. So we're going to choose to spend it on God, on the Master, on what he's given us to do. Now, number 3, when we are spending our life for the Master, we have to make sure it's on the right things. Now, I have people who work underneath of me. When I give tasks or when I ask things to be done, I expect that those things are done. If I need, okay, for instance, Caleb runs the videos. And if his job is videos, but every time it's time to set up the cameras, he's mopping the floor, he might be doing something for me that I've asked him to do. It might be a great thing that he's doing. It might be a very nice, kind, loving thing because nobody else wants to mop the floor, so Caleb just takes one for the team. That's awesome. Thank you, Caleb. Except the videos aren't there, and we actually just needed the videos. Now, we can do the same thing for God. Imagine that. Sometimes, we get excited about things that we hear about, and we know, listen, that would be exciting to do. I want to go do that. I think God would be honored by this thing, and that's great. But we got to make sure that we're not just spending our time, but that we're spending it on the right things. What does God want for us? If you go to Colossians chapter 3, this is going to give you the easiest thing. Now, I had 10 things listed. 10 things that we can spend our life on that would honor God. All 10 things are biblical. I had verses to back them up. And then I thought, but wait, all of these things are hard to remember. 10 things is a long list to remember, isn't it? You're not going to memorize those real quick, but I can show you a verse that you can memorize that is one thing to remember that teaches every other thing. Look at it. Chapter 3, verse 23. He says, and what's the second word? Whatever you do, do it heartily, meaning put your heart into it. As for the who? Lord, and not for who? Men. whatever you do, do it heartily, as for the Lord, and not unto men. So if you want your life to be spent on the right things, whatever you are doing, do it as unto the Lord. And what this really does is it gives you two little criteria that you can use. Number one, am I really doing this as unto the Lord? If God were actually standing there, would I be doing it this way, or would I be trying a little bit harder? Would I be doing it a little bit better, paying a little bit more attention? Because the Bible says whatever you do. That means everything that your life contains. And in Corinthians, he says, whether you're even eating or drinking, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Every part of your life should be as unto Jesus. Whatever you do, do it as unto him. And so sometimes there's things that I know that I'm not doing as if God were watching me. I know that. I just know that there's some things that I do that are subpar. It's just not my best effort. It's just a little bit of effort. I'm just throwing things together because it needs done, not because I want it to be right. And if you can't find things to do it right, or if you can't find time to do it right the first time, how are you going to find time to do it the second time? But when you do it as unto the Lord the first time, you never have to think about going back and redoing it because you just did it right. For us, it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether that's building a cabinet or watching kids or giving Harper a bottle. It doesn't matter what we're doing. Every one of us has things that we do. But are we doing them as unto the Lord? And then the second question, it kind of gives you a little ammo in your toolbox, is would the Lord want me to do this? Because I can do things that are heartily. I can heartily engage in an angry conversation. I can heartily cut down people with my words. I can heartily get in on the gossip. I can heartily take substances that make me feel better that I want. But that's not unto the Lord. That's unto man. Because I am the one who wants that. So whatever we do, first off, it should be of the quality that would be pleasing to the Lord. But number two, it should be the kinds of things that are pleasing to the Lord. And now, guess what? We figured out that our life is short. We figured out that we want to spend it on what God has for us. And now we figured out what we should spend it on in order to please him. And finally, number four. Sometimes you're going to find that you're not spending your life on the right things. And in that case, make a change. If you're not spending your life on the right things, make a change. Now, that's a hard word, but it's also something that we all know to do, but do not do. Have you ever thought, man, I got to get with those people. I got to hang out with them. Or you see an old friend and you're like, man, we should get together. And then you don't. Because you never made a change. Great idea, great thought, no change, no effort. And for us, sometimes we come in Sunday after Sunday. At least I do sometimes. And I know God wants me to do something, but I am not doing it. Therefore, I need change, but I do not do the change. My guess is I'm not the only person in here who knows week after week there's some things that just need to be different. Change. If you've been waiting for a sign, here it is. Gotcha. Make a change. Proverbs 26:11. I want to show you this verse and then how it ties into the very core of what we've been talking about. Proverbs chapter 26, verse 11 says, as a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool returns to his folly. As a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool returns to its folly. Sometimes we just act like dumb dogs. And we know that there's something wrong, and we keep going back and keep going back and keep going back. And let me give you a little pro tip. If you find that you keep going back, change the circumstances. The best way not to act like a dog is not to be a dumb dog. The best way not to act like a fool is not to do the things that a fool does leading up to his folly. You find that you always get in trouble when you talk to these people. Stop talking to them. You find that every time the TV is on in the other room, you would rather go do that than read your Bible. Well, don't have the TV on in the other room. Like, it's not that hard, and you know what to do. but sometimes we forget to actually make the change. And that's what I'm talking about. We know how to avoid the things that get us in trouble. We know how not to do the things that get us in trouble, but yet we don't change. And he says, a fool does that. Now, I want you to keep that word fool in the definition of a fool. He's someone who keeps going back to what's wrong, to his folly. Now, turn back to Ephesians chapter 5. Ephesians chapter 5, and we are almost done. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15. Remember, a fool does what is wrong multiple times. He keeps going back to his folly. Chapter 5, verse 15 of Ephesians says, see then that you walk carefully, not as what? Fools. So if you don't want to be a fool, what do you want to be? He says, not as fools, but as wise men. So don't be foolish, be wise. Meaning, if you want to redeem the time, like the next part of that verse says, you want to make the most of the short life that you have, don't keep going back to the things that get you in trouble. When you make a mistake, move forward, not forward a little bit and then turn around and back. Don't return to folly. Continue in wisdom. And just a little bonus, I don't have it on the screen, but James says that if any of you lack wisdom, ask of God. You know why? Because he doesn't just give a little bit. He's going to give you more than you even need. When's the last time we asked God for wisdom about the thing that we keep falling on, thing that we keep messing up on? And then I want you to take this as a human, as an individual Christian, and then I want you to take this into the life of the church. I've showed you what it looks like as a Christian. Now, as a church, realize that our time is short. Our life is short. This church may be around in 80, 100 years. It may be around 200 years from now if we built an absolute monument of a church. What is that to eternity? It's short. Realize that our church can just exist, or we can spend our resources, our time and effort and money on things that matter. And then realize that sometimes we're going to make the wrong decisions, and we're going to want to spend our church's life doing what God has called us to do. I think we all want that. We all desire that. But sometimes we're going to find that we're going to spend it in effort and in time in ways that might not be wise. And that's when it's time to make a change. For us, I want you to think about that as an individual,